Shalom, shalom, friends, and welcome to this episode here of the Watchdog, exclusively on the Synagogue of Course. I am your host, CJ Cox, and I am very thankful to have you guys here with us today. We're going to have a very interesting news program for you. Lots of interesting, intriguing, somewhat terrifying, different news events going on in the world, as always. But nonetheless, happy to have you guys here and all the different formalities and such. So a little bit different, real quick, before we get into anything today. As you guys can see, this is obviously not live. I am trying to kind of keep the same general format, right? Which is why I have this picture of my synagogue logo from StreamYards, so that it kind of looks the same as when it goes live, so that I get the same general feel and atmosphere when you guys are watching the show. But this is, alas, not live. Why is it not live? Well, because I do use the free version of StreamYards, and as a result, I do have a limited number of hours I can actually live stream in the month, and I kind of want to reserve all of those for open rooms, because I really like the whole open room thing, and I also do think it is a pretty good way to get people interested in the channel. So far, the 2 open rooms that I've done have done more for this channel than anything sans debating, as far as improving, people's actual, interest in it, watch time, subscription, things like that. So obviously not just the fact that I enjoy it, but a little bit of pragmatism behind the matter too. So as a result, like I said, this is going to be pre-recorded. Next Fridays will be pre-recorded also, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's still going to be trying to be getting these watchdogs 3 days a week. But they are all going to be pre-recorded until I can manage to either get the Skrilla Forward to buy a 1-year subscription to the better versions of StreamYard, or potentially just have enough free money that I can rely on myself to spend the extra $25 every month. But nonetheless, I digress. Just wanted to let you guys know why that was going on and why I was actually here, not live, and why you get to see this incredibly done with life caveman in the front here, which I guess you guys would see if I was live anyways, because I don't really show my lovely mug. Nonetheless, we do have a lot of interesting topics to get to today, so I'm going to jump right into our discussion before we get into the articles, which is actually, and a little bit of a forewarning for those of you who may be around children or just may have a little bit of sensitive ears. It's going to be a somewhat explicit and crass topic. However, we're going to talk about pornography a little bit. Specifically, the pornography company based in Canada known as Pornhub. Now, for those of you who do not know, Pornhub has come under quite a bit of scrutiny in the year 2020. Now, of course, pornography companies by default are kind of under a lot of scrutiny because of the profession in which they, partake in. But in this particular situation, Pornhub is under a lot of scrutiny because Pornhub seems to be, shall we say, benefiting from underage pornographic videos on their website, as well as just outright human trafficking and rape. Now, there is one very prominent example of this in a pornography company that went by the name of Girls Do Porn. I can thankfully say went, because this pornography company was forced to shut down its operations after it was found that they were absolutely blackmailing girls into doing hardcore pornography scenes, getting them down to Los Angeles on their own dollar, right, under the guise of doing quote-unquote modeling contracts. And then by the time they would get there, they would actually say, no, you just already signed this contract, you see, and it wasn't really for modeling, it was for hardcore pornography, so here you go, we're going to have whatever sort of debaucherous acts that we want to do done unto you, and then we're also going to sell this, which they told the girls they would not be selling it. Also ended up giving them like a third of the money that they actually promised them. So this was a very big situation in the, I guess, I don't know, industry, I guess you could call it. That's probably what they call it themselves. And Girls Do Porn ended up getting shut down, but one of the things that ended up being brought up over the course of this by a couple of anti-porn activists, who I am very proud of, is people started to actually go after Pornhub, asking the question, why is it that this stuff was allowed to become so popular on your website in the first place? And of course, there are other reasons besides the fact that this is human trafficking and pornography law, right, that make this interesting. namely the fact that Pornhub is actually a video streaming service, and laws that impact them may or may not end up impacting other video streaming services like YouTube, GodTube, BitChute, and etc. Of course, maybe not. We'll see how that ends up working out. Obviously, Pornhub is also Canadian too, so which I only say obviously because I already mentioned that in the beginning of the show. But I digress on that. So, this woman whose name is fleeting me, she put forward a petition to get people to actually demand the Canadian government investigate the company Pornhub and its relation to this girls do porn company that was very clearly involved in basically trafficking rape videos. All right, there's no other way to put it. That's exactly what was happening. So far, this petition has not really gone anywhere. It doesn't appear that there are any charges or anything of that nature being brought against Pornhub. However, it has managed to shine an awful lot of light on some other absolutely disgusting practices the video streaming platform is currently involved in. For example, it has been pointed out by numerous people, and I'm not going to name the terms here because we don't need to get crass, but it has been pointed out by numerous people since this petition has gone forward, people from Covenant Eyes and Fight the New Drug and other anti-porn activist groups, have put forward evidence that actually you can look for very explicit and derogatory and degrading terms on Pornhub, right? And you will actually find results. And these results sometimes will involve crimes, or at least what very much appears to be crimes. Things that are violent, things that involve very young girls, even what appears to be at least younger than the age of 18. And in many instances, it has even been proved in a court of law they were under the age of 18. So far, Pornhub has managed to convince everybody, at least in the Canadian government, that they are not actually involved in any way, shape, or form in the propagation of this material on their website. And there have been arguments put forward that in the same way that YouTube is not responsible for the propagation of certain genres of content on its website, so Pornhub is also not responsible for which particular genres get popular on its website. But of course, everybody knows that when it comes to YouTube, we draw the line at violent crime, sexual crime, things of that nature, right? Even when YouTube was allowing people like Alex Jones on its platform, it was still not allowing you to put videos of little girls being raped on its platform, right? That is so far being allowed to happen, being allowed to, be uploaded and those sorts of things on Pornhub, which, by the way, if you happen to have a pornography addiction, first off, I would like to recommend Covenant Eyes to you. They do definitely help with fighting pornography addiction, but also, maybe it'll help convince you to stop that when you know that the company that you're actually getting this pornography from, is actually actively involved in trafficking little girls and posting their videos on its platform, monetizing them, making money from them. It has been pointed out by numerous people also that there is virtually no standards whatsoever to actually upload a video onto Pornhub, and actually worse than that, as it turns out, all verification that is done on the website is actually only for the uploader and does not in any way, shape, or form verify the quote-unquote performers in the video. So if somebody were to create some level of fake alias, right, and I'll tell you what the verification is in a moment, because you really could create a fake alias. It's in no way, shape, or form a proper verification. But if someone, nonetheless, were to create some level of fake alias, right, they could then verify the fake alias and then go do whatever it is that they're doing, trafficking or seducing underage girls into these sex videos, recording these sex videos, posting them, and since that alias is verified, those videos are totally cool according to the Pornhub website, right? Even though there was no actual verification to deduce the age of the quote-unquote actresses, to deduce whether or not they were on any sort of drugs, to deduce whether or not they have any sort of a career in this field, right? Whether or not they were consenting, so on and so forth, right? And by the way, that verification technique for these aliases, right? You literally only have to write your name down and take a picture of you with that name, right? Either on a piece of paper or on your body, as well as the Pornhub logo, and then send that to Pornhub's verification team. That is it. You will then be verified. You can start uploading videos, and these videos can include any sorts of debaucheries, right? Because Pornhub does not actually check any more than that. And this has been demonstrated numerous times by numerous anti-porn activists. Now, why am I bringing this up right now? Well, because dead clock is right twice a day. The Lord does work miracles. The New York Times, thank God, actually posted an op-ed calling Pornhub out for its illegal sex trafficking and pedophilic videos, which it has on its platform. And actually, interestingly enough, and this is a pretty cool development, actually. I like this, right? This is good news. Pornhub initially denied any sort of involvement. And in fact, they even made the preposterous claim that they were actually having human beings watch every second of the pornography that was actually uploaded onto their platform, which is quite literally impossible because I can't remember, Matt Walsh just gave the number earlier today, but I think it's something like 1.5 million hours of pornography uploaded to Pornhub every year. They just simply don't have the workforce necessary to accomplish such a thing, right? So everybody knew that they were lying, but nonetheless, they made all these bold claims saying, no, we have no involvement whatsoever. We do everything perfectly, and we make sure every single one of these videos is watched to make sure there's no foul play, and right? In response to this New York Times op-ed. But then, people started actually getting curious because of this New York Times op-ed. This started trending, little bit of controversy brewed, and now Pornhub has actually turned around and said, no, we're totally going to revamp the whole thing to make sure it's actually good and to make sure we are taking the proper steps, which, by the way, contradicts what they had said earlier, because if you're already taking the proper steps, then there wouldn't be proper steps to take, but I digress on that. So, we might actually see, potentially, some level of crackdown on the sex trafficking that is being perpetrated by the company that is Pornhub. And even if we don't, I would just like to take this time to point out to everybody that pornography is disgusting. It is not disgusting simply because it's a disgusting act, but it is degrading for the women who are involved. It is degrading for the men who decide to burn with their lusts for it. It is degrading to the spouses of those involved and to the spouses of those who are, partaking in it, watching it. It is degrading to the parents of those who have birthed the girls who have made the unfortunate decisions to be in this situation. It is degrading to God. It is offensive to God to take temples of His Holy Spirit. And I know I'm getting a little, spiritual. This is obviously a news show, but I firmly believe this, so I'm going to say it anyway. It is degrading to the temple of the Holy Spirit that is your body, and therefore an offense to God. So it's an offense to the woman involved, to the man who is actually, watching the videos, and of course you can switch the genders there if you'd like, because there are male performers and women who watch porn. It's a disgrace to the parents who birthed these people. It's a disgrace to the spouses involved. It's a disgrace to our very Lord. It's just a disgrace to our society. So please, 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 I implore you, find help. I know it's an addiction, but find help. It does exist. I recommend Covenant Eyes and Fight the New Drug. Turn away from pornography. It is one of the worst ills and worst just egregious debaucheries currently infiltrating our society, and it is actively involved the entire industry. I guarantee you it's the entire industry. It's not just the largest streaming site in the history of pornography, which is Pornhub, or this massive website that is Girls Do Porn, right? This industry is built off of exploiting young girls and exploiting the lusts of young boys. That is the whole point of the pornography industry. So please, if you find yourself with these addictions, if you find yourself with these inclinations, if you are struggling to get out of pornography, there are different places that can help. There are counselors that can help. Pastors can help. Covenant Eyes and Fight the New Drug, again, I will suggest. And just know that when you decide to partake in those things, you are actually, even though I'm sure it is not your intention, indirectly supporting the people who are actively doing all of the Jeffrey Epstein cuties crap that we talk about all the time, right? Not just, putting it in news tabloids or having a movie that's some pedo propaganda, but no, they're actually involved in child sex trafficking and trafficking rape pornography. That is happening. It is happening on Pornhub, as well as guaranteed numerous other websites throughout the internet. And I would just implore you to please remove yourself from pornography. Rant on that over. I have wasted 15 minutes. So, let's go ahead and get into some other stuff. Hang on, I gotta get out of this full screen here. Very interesting news article coming from the Times of Israel. I wanted to talk about it on my last Watchdog, but unfortunately we did not end up having the time. Kushner, Jared Kushner, did travel, and this was actually released before it happened, but nonetheless, to Saudi Arabia with eyes on Israel normalization, meaning normalization of relations between the Israeli government and the Saudi Arabian government, which of course is hugely important for cultural and religious reasons, considering the fact that Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of the Arab people, the Arab language, and the Islamic faith, and also considering the fact that Israel is, of course, the Holy Land, the birthplace of the Messiah, the birthplace of all of the prophets, the Torah, the Tanakh, the New Testament, Jerusalem, right? The Temple Mount, the Jewish people, etc. These people have never been friends. If you believe the scriptures as I do, they have not been friends all the way back to Ishmael and Isaac, right? And if there is some level of normalization, that would be just absolutely huge. It would be massive. It would completely shake up the entire field of geopolitics in this world. And in a lot of ways that I think would probably not be very good. So we're going to go ahead and read this article so that everybody knows what's going down. Now that I'm thinking about it, I may have even already read this article on the last Watchdog. But even if I did, it's a very important article, so we're going to read it again anyways. Outgoing White House advisor said seeking additional Mid-East wins before Biden's January inauguration will meet Crown Prince in Neom, where Netanyahu Pompeo met him last week. Now, fun fact, Neom may or may not, it is alleged, be on the site of, at least near the site of the biblical Mount Sinai. Not the Mount Sinai that we know today, which is on the Sinai Peninsula and commonly known as Jubal al-Musa, but the biblical Mount Sinai, which the Apostle Paul in Galatians very clearly indicated was in Arabia, as did Josephus and others. Now, I'm not claiming definitively, of course, that Neom is built where the biblical Mount Sinai is, but there have been those who have suggested that, and well before this happened, right, that was being suggested as a site, and then they decided to build Neom there. So just an interesting little trivia bit for you, but nonetheless. White House advisor Jared Kushner will travel to Saudi Arabia this week in an apparent last-ditch effort to broker a normalization deal between the kingdom and Israel, according to a report on Sunday. Kushner will meet with Saudi Crown Prince with Saudi Crown Prince, I don't know why I said Prince twice, that was redundant. I'm Jay from the Department of Redundancy Department. But anyways, Kushner will meet with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Neom, the Red Sea city where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last week held a secret rendezvous with the prince alongside U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, which of course we reported on for you last week, and or not last week, last Monday, and I actually believe we were talking about it last week as well. It was the first known visit to Saudi Arabia by an Israeli leader, but the talks on Iran and possible normalization reportedly yield no substantial progress. A U.S. official told Reuters on Sunday that Kushner is hoping to orchestrate additional normalization pacts between Israel and Arab states before the January inauguration of U.S. President-elect Joe Biden, following his success with the UAE, Bahrain, and Sudan. Which, by the way, fun fact, some developments in those particular pacts known as the Abraham Accords. It has been reported by Haaretz. I could not get the article because I do not subscribe to them, which is they do require a $1 a month. It's not really that big of a deal, obviously, but I just don't want to support leftist news is really where I'm at with it. But nonetheless, it has been reported by Haaretz that Israeli lobbyists are actually lobbying for the passing of U.S. UAE weapons deals. Israeli lobbyists in the United States, are lobbying the United States government to pass U.S. UAE weapons deals that would give large caches of weapons, or caches, however you say that word, to to the UAE and to Bahrain also. So that obviously is a pretty massive development, and that could end up escalating some of the tensions there, right? We know for a fact that there's a lot of tensions between Israel and Turkey, between Europe and Turkey, between Armenia and Turkey, between Israel and Saudi Arabia, or not Israel and Saudi Arabia, excuse me, Israel and Iran, between Saudi Arabia and Iran, between the UAE and Iran. So, we'll see what happens, man. It does not look good. But nonetheless, I wanted to go ahead and let you guys know about that while the Abraham Accords were being mentioned. The Trump administration has hoped Saudi Arabia would join the UAE and Bahrain in recognizing Israel and forging diplomatic ties, a move seen as increasingly distant in the wake of Joe Biden's election as U.S. president. It did at least appear that it was possible for a moment there, and then now a lot of people are saying potentially not because Joe Biden has been elected the president. Now, of course, if that is overturned in some way because of election fraud, which I do personally believe there is obvious election fraud, but nonetheless, then that obviously would extend a deadline there. Obviously, Trump could also be reelected in another year because he hasn't had 2 terms. And, of course, we could just see something happening with Joe Biden. We could also see something happening very quickly before Joe Biden becomes the president. So there's a lot of different possibilities here, other than just the possibility of, hey, it just dies, and this is as far as we got. But nonetheless. But Saudi leaders have hitherto indicated that Israeli-Palestinian peace will have to come first, and I do believe that there is nothing that Trump will be able to do about that. I think that the Saudis are going to stick to their guns there, and like I have said before, I personally am predicting that Judea, Samaria, and East Jerusalem will be given to the Palestinian people as well as the Gaza Strip for a nation of Palestine. East Jerusalem will be their capital. Israel will get what it calls Israel proper, as well as the Golan Heights. And West Jerusalem is its capital. The international community recognizing East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem as these separate nations' capitals. And I believe they will internationalize the Old City as either a headquarters for the UN or a headquarters for a new UN of religions that they have definitely been pushing, or potentially even a headquarters for the Vatican, or even all three, right? I don't exactly know who would own the Old City, but I do believe that in the end they will internationalize that Old City for interreligious purposes as well as international purposes, and of course, split the city in half, giving each nation a capital, and giving those respective peoples the land regions that I just shared with you. That is my prediction. We will, of course, see what happens. I am no prophet, but that's just what I think will end up coming about. However it ends up coming about, I don't know. But that's just what I think will end up being the case. Kushner will also travel to Qatar during his trip. He will be accompanied by Middle East envoys Avi Berkowitz and Brian Hook, and chief executive of the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. Excuse me. Let me say that one more time. And chief executive of the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, Adam Bowler, according to the report. Let me scroll down here a little bit. During the trip, Kushner will also likely seek to heal a years-long rift between Qatar and other Arab states. Bahrain, along with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Egypt, have imposed an air, naval, and land embargo on Qatar since June 2017, over the insistence that Doha is too close to Iran, and radical Islamic groups. Qatar obviously denies these charges. Kushner's visit will come in the shadow of the assassination of a top Iran nuclear scientist on Friday, blamed on Israel. To be fair, it's only been blamed on Israel by the Iranians, who blame literally everything on Israel, including but not limited to the bad weather in their country. You think that's a joke, but you should listen to some of their news. It's insane. Saudi Arabia and Israel are both sworn enemies of Iran, which of course is the reason for their potential co-belligerent status with each other, sharing concerns over Tehran's nuclear program and regional influence. Saudi Arabia said waiting for Biden. Saudi Arabia reportedly pulled back from a normalization deal with Israel due to Biden's election win this month and the prince's desire to build ties with the incoming U.S. administration. Now, it will be interesting if Biden does end up becoming the president, because we will have two different leaders in King Salman of Saudi Arabia and President Joe Biden of the United States of America, who are essentially semi-sentient bowls of pudding being controlled by their underlings, i.e. Vice President Kamala Harris and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So that'll be a little interesting thing that they might be able to, come together and I guess find common ground on or whatever, right? Bin Salman, son of the 84-year-old King Salman and the kingdom's de facto ruler, is reluctant to, quote, take the step now when we could use a deal later to help cement relations with the new American leader, end quote, the Wall Street Journal reported on Friday. A Saudi government advisor had earlier in the week, confirmed the Netanyahu bin Salman Pompeo meeting and the trip to the WSJ, which is the Wall Street Journal, saying that the meeting, which had lasted several hours, focused on Iran and the establishment of diplomatic ties between Riyadh and Jerusalem, but did not yield substantial agreements. And of course, we reported on that last Monday if you guys are interested in getting more information on that particular deal. Citing Saudi advisors and U.S. officials, the Wall Street Journal reported Friday that a deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia under the brokerage of the new president, bin Salman, hopes could put relations between the Biden administration and Riyadh on surer footing, end quote. Biden has taken a tougher stance with Riyadh on its human rights record, the war in Yemen, and the 2018 killing at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The president-elect said in October that the U.S. under his administration would reassess our relationship with Riyadh. Last week, Biden said he would punish Saudi leaders over the journalist's murder. And by the way, you can just rest assured that that is absolutely not going to happen because virtually every president has said they're going to do something about the Saudis. Obama said he'd do something about the Saudis, and Trump said he'd do something about the Saudis, and now Biden, and it's just not going to happen. It literally will not happen, I guarantee it. Saudi Arabia is basically like an American colony, right? We practically own them. And there is no reason for us to start, to basically start jeopardizing that potential relationship, right? Over the death of some lowly journalist. And I don't say that because that's my personal views, just so you know. I say that because that's what I believe to be the views of the elitist scum that run these governments. I mean, they don't give a damn about Khashoggi, right? They don't care in the slightest about, women being, stoned for having the audacity to be gang raped in their country. They just simply do not care. And I mean, you can even see this in the fact that, everybody was praising Mohammed bin Salman as this great progressive, ideologue when he decided to create a Red Sea resort where you could go wear a bikini and drink alcohol and, show for the first time in, I think, like 40 plus years, a movie in Israel, Saudi Arabia, which ended up being the Emoji Movie, right? And they give him all these different praises. And of course, not only are the rights to walk around half naked and walk around half naked and watch the freaking Emoji Movie barely even rights in comparison to, the right to freedom of religion and the press and, not get stoned for having the audacity to be raped. I'd like to just reiterate that one, right? Not only do these so-called rights pale in comparison to these actual human rights, which the Saudi government still withholds from its people, but on top of that, they're not even serious about it, right? They're not even serious about it. They showed this one movie. They gave women the right to drive and then arrested all the women's right to drive activists. They said, hey, we can have this resort where women can wear bikinis, but everywhere else in Saudi Arabia, as has been shown by numerous feminists being arrested for wearing short shorts and things of that nature, this isn't going to be the case, right? And of course, I'm not even endorsing the wearing of short shorts or the drinking of alcohol or the watching of the Emoji Movie, right? But what I am saying is that these are nothing more than pacification techniques. It happens all the time, right? It's the reason why leftists and communists are so often, pushing this, hey, we're going to support your gay marriage and we're going to support your weed legalization and we're going to support psilocybin and all this other stuff that really genuinely does not matter in the grand scheme of things, right? While they push these, hey, we're going to take away your freedom of religion, your freedom of the press, your freedom of assembly. We want to get them guns, etc. Because they know that you, quite frankly, and I don't mean you, the listener, but I mean the laity, the vast majority of people, right? The stupid, quite frankly, right? And I don't mean that in the sense that they are literally intellectually deficient, but I do mean that in the sense that they willingly decide to zombify themselves and just completely reject any sort of information that is either A, contrary to their worldview, or B, even remotely difficult for their brain to grasp. Which, let's be clear, most information is difficult for the brain to grasp, right? Information is complicated. That's why there's people studying this kind of stuff for their whole lives. But that's not an excuse to just, reject it. Anyways, I'm rambling on that. The point being, these people use these so-called rights to pacify you, knowing that they don't lose any power if you smoke pot and let your ass hang out of your shorts, but they do gain power if you don't have the right to have freedom of speech, to vote properly, to go out and worship in the way that you see fit. And I do hope you guys excuse my French, but, I see people in the United States and Saudi Arabia and in France and etc., right? They fall for this constantly. And it is such an obvious bait and switch technique. I mean, really, look, I support weed legalization, right? I do. I think it's stupid to arrest somebody for smoking a plant that is absolutely has less negative side effects than legal things like alcohol and nicotine, right? I completely concur with the cannabis activists on that. However, what's more important? The right to actually defend yourself against criminals, against foreign invaders, and also against your own government? Or the right to smoke a doobie? I mean, maybe your value system is just all sorts of whacked out, but I personally like to defend my liberties more than I like the ability to potentially smoke pot. Thank you very much, right? And it is such an obvious technique. And to be fair, it does happen even with people who you think are well-meaning, right? And even in issues that are just as emotive but are still important. Unfortunately, I was just talking about gun rights. Gun rights, I think, is one of them. Every conservative can just say, I support guns, and like freaking flies to the lamps that shock them, right? All these morons will just go vote for that dude, even though that dude might support red flag laws and the banning of suppressors and taking firearms and reducing the amount of the capacity of your magazine and things like that, right? But it doesn't matter. He's got an R next to his name, and he said that one time that he supported the National Rifle Association. You know what I mean? Anyways, I'm done with my rant. I got to get back to the article. Biden has taken a tougher stance with Riyadh on its human rights record. I already read that. A foreign diplomat in Riyadh, cited by Reuters this week, suggested that the prospect of normalization was greater under the incoming Biden administration. Quote, normalization is a carrot to get Biden's focus away from other issues, especially human rights, end quote, the diplomat said. I actually am inclined to agree with that a little bit, in that I could see, since we have already seen the foundations, if you will, set by the Abraham Accords and by the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem by the United States and by the pushing forward of Trump's peace plan, right? With those things, we have kind of already seen the foundation set up for potential Saudi-Israeli normalization. And as I pointed out before, I think the only thing that's preventing Israeli-Palestinian peace, because I don't think Netanyahu is serious about his Zionism, is the fact that a little bit too much control over Judea and Samaria is given to the Israeli people, at least from the perspective of the Palestinians. I, of course, think that all of Judea and Samaria belongs to the Israeli people, and none of it to the Palestinians, but I digress. If Biden is a little bit more pro-Palestine, which we know he is, we know for a fact he is, right? That's well established. He may be willing to take away some of those areas of Judea and Samaria from his particular peace deal, right? And say, no, let's give those to Palestine, give them all of Judea and Samaria, right? And keep Israel in, Israel proper. And by the way, Judea and Samaria are the regions that collectively come together to form what we commonly call the West Bank, right? Which is a total misnomer, in my opinion. It is Judea and Samaria, but nonetheless. I could see that. I could absolutely see that, right? Because, like I said, Biden is more pro-Palestine, and to be frank, Netanyahu's days do seem numbered. I do think we will see him removed from the prime ministership very soon. I mean, as it's set now, I think it started in June, if I'm not mistaken. He only had 18 months before he actually had to give up the prime ministership to Benny Gantz, right? Because they're doing this weird alternating prime ministers thing. That was their sort of deal, to set up a government instead of having a fourth election in a year. So it's inevitable that Netanyahu is going to leave that position at some point very soon. We also, of course, know that Yehuda Glick wants to run for president in 2021, and he may or may not end up winning, and that would throw an entirely, different monkey wrench into this situation as far as the status quo of the Temple Mount is concerned, right? But all of the pieces really are there, and it is totally possible that a more liberal, pro-Palestine, pro-globalist administration would be willing to concede just enough to get both Palestine and Israel on board, and therefore the international community, Saudi Arabia, the UN, the Pope, etc. Pompeo had hoped to build on the momentum of the Trump administration's Abraham Accords, which saw Israel formalize ties with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan, and finalize an agreement with Saudi Arabia, but watched as a potential capstone to the Trump administration's efforts to reorder the politics of the region and build a bulwark against Iran, slipped from his grasp, end quote, according to the Wall Street Journal report. Although that's not 100% true, of course, right? Never before have the Israeli people and the Saudi people, even in secret, had these sorts of talks with each other, right? At least not that I know of. So, there is definitely what they would consider to be progress being made here. And I voice it that way because, as I've said before, I'm not entirely convinced that co-belligerency between Saudi Arabia and Israel is a good thing. And I refer to it specifically as co-belligerency because they will definitely not be friends. But, it's possible I could be wrong, but that seems to me to be just like the Israeli-Palestinian quote-unquote peace deals, that just seems to me to be another cog in getting us towards global governance, UN for religions, so on and so forth. Reuters reported on Friday that another reason a deal with Riyadh remained elusive was King Salman and his reported opposition to normalization with Israel without the establishment of a Palestinian state, an analysis also made Thursday by a senior Israeli source cited by Israeli TV. I am a little intrigued to know if Mohammed bin Salman shares that view, or if the semi-sentient bowl of pudding that is King Salman is actually putting his foot down for once in his life. According to the report, King Salman was kept out of the loop about Netanyahu's trip to the kingdom for talks with the crown prince, which, of course, just goes to show that the actual power behind the throne right now is Mohammed bin Salman and not King Salman. But, when the bowl of pudding, reveals its semi-sentience, you do have to acknowledge it. Otherwise, the people start to get a little suspicious. On Friday night, Israel's Channel 13 reported that Saudis have raised three main conditions for a treaty with Israel: the implementation of a major advanced arms deal with the U.S., the clearing of their name over the killing of Khashoggi, and a genuine Israeli commitment to a two-state solution. The report was not sourced, so we don't necessarily know if that is true, but of course there's really no reason to believe why it wouldn't, I guess. Now, of course, you don't just believe something because there's no reason to not to believe it, right? That's obviously fallacious. But, just it's sort of a maybe, maybe not is basically what I'm trying to communicate. Khashoggi's murder has continued to cast a shadow over the international standing of bin Salman, Mohammed bin Salman, right, the Crown Prince, whose associates have been sanctioned by the U.S. and the U.K. for their alleged involvement in the brutal killing. The Crown Prince has denied ordering the killing, and the kingdom had put at least 11 people on trial for the killing, some said to be close to the Crown Prince. And of course, we even reported on that at the time, and it was very obvious at the time that the Crown Prince was selling out people who were even his allies, right, members of his own royal family, in order to purge the Saudi royal family of potential threats and sort of consolidate his own personal power. There was even a very prominent Saudi billionaire who he actually had arrested as well. The kingdom has also been angling for a new arms deal with the U.S. following last year's $8.1 billion agreement that bypassed Congress and raised the ire of lawmakers from both sides. Yes, bypassed Congress. Look, and I understand why people are supporting President Donald Trump, right? I do get it. I'm not here to chastise you, but you guys do need to understand, right, that happened under President Donald Trump's watch, amongst numerous other things. We need to be enlightened to these things, because if we're not, then we cannot possibly hold these people accountable. Okay? And if you're really willing to just live your life with John Boners and Mitch McConnell's and Paul Ryan's and Mitt Romney's and John McCain's and, yes, even Donald Trump's, as much good as he was able to do, then we will never reclaim this republic, frankly. And that needs to be stated, okay? There is no respect for our legislative branch. The judicial branch is out of control. The debt is out of control. We are committing acts of war all the time without any sort of declaration of war whatsoever, so on and so forth. Anyways. Man, it's already been 41 minutes. It's crazy. Earlier this month, the Trump administration formally notified Congress that it intends to sell 50 stealth F-35 fighter jets and other weapons to the United Arab Emirates as part of a broader arms deal worth over $23 billion. Pompeo said he had authorized the sale in keeping with the administration's Middle East peace efforts and directly tied the arms sale to the UAE's decision to normalize ties with Israel. The arms deal was controversial in Israel, and officials had previously expressed some concern about an F-35 sale because it could affect the balance of military power in the region, and Netanyahu had denied he gave approval to the sale as part of the treaty with the UAE. This has been publicly questioned by Benny Gantz and outright disputed by opposition party members. Israel believes Saudi Arabia and Qatar are interested in similar arms deals with the U.S. President Donald Trump, obviously of the United States, has repeatedly predicted that Saudi Arabia and up to 9 other countries are readying to normalize relations with Israel following the UAE, Bahrain, and Sudan. And I do think he's telling the truth, even if it is going to take a couple more steps to get there. But I think that Trump can be trusted in that, personally. I think that he's correct. And I think we're going to see that very soon. How soon? I mean, I guess I don't necessarily know, but even a decade is very soon, right? Bahrain normalizing ties suggested at least a Saudi acquiescence to the idea, as the island kingdom relies on Riyadh. Saudi Arabia has also approved flights between Israel and its new Gulf friends, passing over its territory. Israel has long had clandestine ties with Saudi Arabia and Gulf Arab states that have strengthened in recent years as they confronted a shared threat in Iran, which, of course, has been made more of a threat due to the Iran nuclear deal, which alleged President-elect Joe Biden has said that he will try to reinstate. So we can obviously look forward to some of that lovely garbage. But, man, 43 minutes just on the topic of Pornhub and Kushner going to Saudi Arabia. Super lame. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and see if we can get to some other stuff. We do have a little bit of extra time. One thing I did want to note, I had kind of told you guys about this a couple weeks ago, but we never actually got to read it, and I do want to read it to you. This is from Allgemeiner, the Allgemeiner. I don't know if I'm actually saying that correctly, but nonetheless. German Catholic and Protestant churches are uniting for Jewish and Christian Closer Than You Think campaign. One more time. German Catholic and Protestant churches unite for Jewish and Christian Closer Than You Think campaign. And of course, the obvious reason why we are reporting on this is because this is very clearly related to this whole idea of globalizing religion and making everybody come together to, hold hands with each other in a big giant circle across the whole world. Nonetheless, let's just go ahead and read a little bit here. Germany's Protestant and Catholic churches are coming together in a joint campaign to fight anti-Semitic hatred of Jews under the slogan, Jewish and Christian closer than you think. Now, of course, there is absolutely no problem fighting anti-Semitism, and indeed anti-Semitism and Christianity must not be accepted. You can't really be hateful to human beings and also be a Christian. It's sort of a prerequisite for being a Christian. Now, of course, not to say that any Christian is perfect at that. That's not what I'm claiming, but I digress on that, right? It is true, not to sound like a liberal theologian, because of course we want to throw those out, but it is true that, hatred is just not allowed in the Christian religion, right? But I digress. The problem, of course, with this is not only should Protestants and Catholics not be, having these ecumenical meetings with each other, right? They themselves are not the same body, but also it feeds into this whole globalization thing. The initiative, which will be launched in January, was announced on Thursday at a press conference in Berlin. Quote, it must be made clear that anti-Semitism is a sin and contradicts everything Christianity stands for, end quote, which, to be fair, I agree with. Bishop Heinrich Bedford Strom, chair of the Council of the Evangelical Church in Germany, or EKD, declared, the, quote, central element of the campaign will be posters for each month based on festivals and traditions that will point to similarities and differences between the two religions and which can be displayed in churches and church institutions, end quote, the EKD stated in a press release. One Jewish leader interviewed by the online newsletter of the World Council of Churches warmly endorsed the campaign. Quote, I think it's a good idea for such a poster, and by the way, there's that World Council of Churches again, right? Can't forget to mention them. Quote, I think it's a good idea for such a poster series that presents what's Christian and what's Jewish alongside each other, end quote. Rabbi Andreas Nechama, chair of the General Rabbinical Conference of Germany, said. Nechama, who was involved in developing the campaign, noted its emergence during a period in which anti-Semitism has sharply increased in Germany, which, to be fair, is unfortunately very true. And I do definitely, this is a weird sort of thing, right? Because on one end, I do very much agree with combating that and with helping the Jewish community. I just wish that we would do it in such a way that didn't endorse this globalistic, ecumenical, bogus agenda. Quote, churches are part of this society, so there will be anti-Semitism there as well, even though in many encounters with Christians, I have not experienced this, end quote, said Nechama. Sorry, I went a little bit too far there. Originating from an initiative of the Evangelical Church Berlin, Brandenburg, Silesian, and this is going to be a horrible pronunciation, but nonetheless, Oberlausitz, the campaign has developed into a Germany-wide ecumenical project which has been taken up and supported by the EKD and the German Roman Catholic Bishops' Conference. Quote, we must not look away when Jews are insulted or attacked, end quote. The Catholic Bishop of Erfurt, Ulrich Nehmeyer, is his name. So he's the Catholic Bishop of Erfurt, and his name is Ulrich Nehmeyer. My apologies. This is what he said. Quote, we must not look away when Jews are insulted or attacked, and we must not ignore it when Jewish jokes are laughed at, when people go on about a supposed Jewish world conspiracy, or when the state of Israel is demonized. Now, there's obviously truth to that, and there is overcompensation in that, right? Obviously, there's nothing wrong with laughing at a joke that is told at a Jewish person's expense, right? That is kind of the nature of comedy, frankly. There's nothing wrong with laughing at a joke that's told at the expense of a white person, or at the expense of a Gentile, or at the expense of a religious person. Quite frankly, in my own personal opinion, the only thing that's off limits is Jesus Christ. And that's only for me. I mean, from a legal perspective, obviously that shouldn't be off limits. And those people will, if they decide to do that, they will have their have their comeuppance with God, I guess, right? Hopefully they repent, but nonetheless. So obviously that's not something that would be supported here. When people go on about a Jewish world conspiracy, obviously, should that be illegal? Obviously no, but that is something that definitely shouldn't be ignored. That's a hogwash, garbage conspiracy theory that is propagated throughout the world, throughout a lot of Roman Catholic circles, I would point out. When the state of Israel is demonized, I go, a lot of times anti-Zionism does actually just mask anti-Semitism. That is certainly true. And a lot of times it is sort of coupled with this anti-Jewish conspiracy theory. They control the media, push porn on us all, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And I, of course, as I have shared with you guys before, being a nationalist for all nations, I am firmly Zionist, right? I believe that both what we call Israel proper and the region of Judea and Samaria, commonly known as the West Bank, as well as the entire city of Jerusalem, Gaza, the Golan Heights, those are Jewish land. The Arabs have no claim to it. They're lucky that the Jews let them stay there, frankly. And that's the way that anybody should feel about being in anyone's nation, right? With that said, though, you can certainly take that too far. There are criticisms to be made of the Jewish state, absolutely. There are persecutions against Messianic Jews and Karaite Jews come to mind right off the top of my head. Their obvious racism against Ethiopian Jews comes to mind at the top of my head. The detaining of Jews who are not yet Israeli citizens because of their liberal political views comes to mind off the top of my head. The extremely totalitarian lockdowns that they've now gone into 4 separate times this year come to mind at the top of my head. And we could continue on with that. I mean, right? There's a lot of criticism to be levied about the power the ultra-Orthodox community has in the government, about the fact that they get to avoid military service, about the fact that capitalistic endeavor is squashed and creative endeavor is squashed within the state of Israel, and so on and so forth, right? These nations we have the right to criticize nations. So I only point that out to say there's a lot of truth in this situation, there's a lot of non-truth in this situation. But greater than any of that is what is actually going on, which is an ecumenical movement that is indeed actually operating not just as ecumenism between quote-unquote Christian groups, right? Because I do not believe Catholicism can be properly defined as Christianity, but also involving extra Christian groups, in this particular case, the Jews, right? And we're seeing more and more of a push, not only for ecumenism, but also for globalization and global government involvement in the religious affairs of other nations, coming from all of these different groups, and they seem to be coinciding with each other, and sometimes even, years after we end up initially reporting on it. Nonetheless, we only got 8 more minutes, and there is one last thing I do want to get to. Obviously, there was other stories we wanted to get to, but want to briefly get into this because it's an article that I said that I would share with you guys a while back, and we never ended up doing so we're going to actually read it since we have some time. Police in Toronto, Canada, did break up a maskless indoor dining at Adamson Barbecue. This, of course, is happening in the United States. It is happening in Israel. It is happening in France. This kind of stuff is happening everywhere. And by the way, next Friday, right, for our next episode, one of the things we will actually be discussing is these clampdowns on faith by different nations. We've been talking a lot about it on Rabbit Hole at Rabbit Hole's shameless plug to Nicholas Proclaimer of Messiah's channel, where you can catch me and Brother Nicholas talking about a lot of different stuff, Marxism, the Catholic Church, etc. But nonetheless, this is just another such example of governments all across the world going after restaurant owners, going after churches, going after protests, just basically going after any sort of thing that they don't happen to like, and for whatever reason they don't happen to like it. And this particular situation got quite a bit of social media support, so we're going to read about it. If you've never heard of Toronto restaurant Adamson Barbecue before, which, by the way, if you live in Toronto, you should go eat at Adamson Barbecue. You definitely have now, seeing as the brand opened the doors to its, I don't know how to pronounce this word, sorry, Etobicoke location for indoor dining on Tuesday in blatant defiance of provincial, which is their version of a state, lockdown orders, and is as a result trending on Twitter right now. Of course, it was shut down, and this is about 2 weeks ago, but I still want to let you guys know about it. Just one day after Toronto and Peel regions, just one day after Toronto and Peel regions entered the gray zone of Ontario's new reopening framework and thus shuttered things such as non-essential retail stores and patios, the last on-site dining option restaurant and bars had left after dining rooms were closed on October 10th. Adamson proprietor Adam Skelly decided to fight back against what he said is an unfair singling out of the hospitality industry, And he's, of course, exactly correct. Quote, the data from Toronto Public Health that came out 2 weeks ago shows that 2 of the over 10,000 Ontario COVID deaths were linked to bars, restaurants, and retail. Yes, 2 of the 10,000, my friends. Not 2%, which would be 2 of 100. Not 0.2%, which would be 2 of 1,000. 2 out of the 10,000, 0.02%. 2. But apparently that is enough to completely and totally annihilate these people's lives, these people's livelihoods, these people's dreams. Excuse me. So, why are we getting singled out? He asks. And the big multinational corporations are all essential, while they're packed, end quote. Skelly said in a video posted to the Adamson Instagram account on Monday evening. And of course, that is something that has been shown to be very true. Whether it's Tesla or the Alphabet Company or Facebook or Twitter or Amazon or Berkshire Hathaway or Microsoft, right? All of these different companies are getting richer. All of the people behind them are getting richer. While 80% of small businesses in New York go under. And though most are condemning Skelly's brass decision to open not only outdoor dining but indoor as well today, which I am certainly not, I firmly support Adam Skelly. Yeah, I suggest that you support Adam Skelly. If you can support him using your dollar, I would certainly recommend that you do that as well. But nonetheless, he does have some avid supporters on the site at the QEW and Royal Work Road who are enthusiastically lining up and crowding inside to chow down on some ribs sans face coverings. The event has unsurprisingly attracted a number of vocal anti-maskers that include, according to Toronto Sun reporter Joe Warmington, people wearing Guy Fawkes masks and waving anti-mask banners. The Sun quite predictably seems to be the only outlet that Skelly has been happy to chat with after he apparently insisted that all media vacate the area shortly after opening up shop at 11 a.m., which is, of course, his right. It's his restaurant, and if you have a problem with that, you can go cry in the corner. Reporters on site claimed he screamed at them to get off his property and stopped interviewing customers waiting in line. To be fair, that's significantly nicer than what I would have been. I mean, like, there is a part of me that wonders, like, what isn't justified at this point, considering what they are doing to our livelihoods. But I digress. Protected by 1969 Brandenburg versus Ohio, just so you guys are aware. Meanwhile, he lauded the Sun for what he considers unbiased reportage over the course of the pandemic, which I don't know much about the Sun, so I guess I couldn't comment on that. Here is a Twitter post. Police are now approaching Addison Barbecue in Tobicoke, which is serving customers against provincial regulations today at City News. We can go ahead and watch that. This is from November 24th, 2018. So you can, of course, see there police showing up at his barbecue to shut it down. Excuse me. And yeah. Here's another brief video we'll show you guys. From that Joe Warmington. Are you guys in a group together?
So as you can see, today I left a large space in between our counters here, because we obviously have a lot of people here. We have asked everybody to maintain social distancing, but it appears that there's some civil disobedience happening here today. You can see these stairs are spaced 6 feet apart.
Excuse me. Obviously showing the cops that he is, maintaining social distancing. He's being sanitary. Of course, all restaurants always are because they're required by virtually every government in the West to maintain sometimes even absurd health standards because we take that stuff very seriously. And yet, for some reason, this brave Canadian hero is still having his restaurant shut down and is still being condemned by the brainless masses that unfortunately seem to make up the majority of the Canadian population, as well as the American population, to be fair. Don't start getting nationalistic, my American friends. Despite the fact that the illegal opening was publicized well before it took place, it wasn't until around 11:30 a.m. that Toronto police arrived on scene, and they have since entered the restaurant and engaged with Skelly, who appeared agitated according to reports on Twitter. Yeah, no way. Morons. The only official media that seems able to... I'm sorry, I shouldn't obviously talk that way, but it's hard not to. I mean, these people are thugs. That's what they are. They are statist, authoritarian tyrants, right? And frankly, they need to be stood up to, right? It's not just Adam Skelly in Toronto, right? It's not just Doug Wilson's church in Moscow, or John MacArthur, or Tony Spell in their churches, or the gentleman from Michigan who was being shut down. I think it was a tire store, ended up trending, right? There are a lot of people all throughout the country who are spiritually suffering, who are emotionally, psychologically suffering, who are financially suffering, who are having to line up in breadlines, which I know you leftist scum think is a good idea because your great god Bernie Sanders decided that he was going to support breadlines like an idiot. And I'm sorry, because I'm sitting here, right? I'm sitting here trying to apologize for my rhetoric, and yet it still comes out because I don't understand how people can be so. I mean, it's either stupid or evil. Frankly, I would think you would prefer stupid out of those two. Maybe it's potentially ignorant or spiritually blinded. I don't know, but I just don't understand how people can support these thugs. And that's what these politicians are. If there's any cops who enforce this, that's what those cops are. The sheriffs who enforce this, that is what those sheriffs are. The doctors who recommend this, that is what they are. If the military or National Guard gets involved, that is what they are. Just because I'm conservative, don't think I'm just going to be sitting up here backing these boys in blue and troops, till kingdom come. That is certainly not the case. I support liberty and the Constitution. Of course, in Canada, they don't have the United States Constitution, but we still should at least support human liberty, human freedom, human flourishing, prosperity, and that is completely and totally against, right? I'm sorry, I'm stuttering here. Or rather, these lockdowns are completely and totally against that will to thrive that we humans have, right? That will to be free. And of course, does there sometimes need to be checks on freedoms? Absolutely. Absolutely. You're not free to go, do something debaucherous with your pig or something like that, right? But opening your barbecue so you can feed your family so that other people might be able to enjoy a meal with their family, that is not one of the things that is abusing your freedom. And frankly, if you think that it is, you need to check yourself because you are either stupid or evil. You can decide which it is. The only official media that seems able to document what's taking place inside is Warmington, who continues to share photo and video footage of the scene we, of course, just watched. Fellow reporters state that, as of shortly after noon, it appears that public health and bylaw officers have left the premises, but additional law enforcement officers have arrived and are ticketing cars that are illegally parked on the streets. Mayor John Tory will also be investigating a 311 or 311. I don't know. Maybe that's a reference to something. Maybe there's like something called 311. I don't know. Anyways, 311 employee who was seen fist bumping attendees from inside an official city vehicle. Because of course you're not allowed to fist bump. You're not allowed to show any sort of support whatsoever for people going out and having a freaking meal, for crying out loud. $500,000 fine for Mr. Skelly. According to this Ontario.ca. And of course, this punk wants to go ahead and insult him for having the audacity to use his freedom. That's fine. That's fine. Of course, you probably have no idea what a job is anyway, Chan Tesler. You moron. You degenerate piece of filth. Man, I sound like Smokey Saint right now. I'm sorry, guys. I am very heated. I need to just wrap this up because I'm just getting angrier and angrier as this is going on. And I don't want that to be what this show is about. And I'm contradicting myself every 5 seconds because I keep going back into these rants. So I'm just going to finish this up really quick. I hope you guys bear with me. Man, it's hard not to get angry about this stuff. Given that Skelly is flouting a number of restrictions right now, operating beyond just offering delivery and takeout, not enforcing the provincial mask bylaw or social distancing measures, he could potentially face hundreds of thousands in penalties, which of course he should not pay. And of course, if they try to arrest him, he should not cooperate. But that's just my opinion. But according to his own accounts to journalists, he has not actually been fined anything today, and officers have since cooperated in stating that he won't be charged, if at all, until later in the week, which we can confirm has actually happened as of this time. This is another tweet here. Skelly, who just walked out from the restaurant, says he wasn't fined today, won't talk to us anymore. Mayor John Tory, speaking to reporters, says he doesn't direct enforcement, but in his opinion, the time for warnings is over, and business owners and customers found in violation of antivirus rules should be ticketed. Though Skelly's frustration is understandable and is shared by all those businesses, those whose businesses, have been financially crippled by pandemic measures, his unsafe method of trying to alert his unsafe and method, because this person doesn't know how to type. And yes, I will insult you because you're going to decide to go against liberty, and so as far as I'm concerned, you're worthy of being insulted. But nonetheless, his unsafe and method, moron, of trying to alert people to the plight of the industry right now was not the most effective or well received. And frankly, I don't give a damn if it was well received, and you shouldn't give a damn if it's well received, because it is not your place to decide whether it is well received. Adam Skelly has the right to open his barbecue. He has the right to be employed, to feed his family, to feed himself, and yes, to feed other people. Sorry that that's such a crime. Man, I'm very agitated. I'm sorry, friends, I'm very agitated. Nonetheless, we're gonna go ahead and just end this because I'm getting too agitated. So, life is terrible and then you die, right? So thank you guys very much for watching this episode of The Watchdog, exclusively on the Synagogue, of course. I appreciate you, and if you liked this, I do, of course, appreciate any likes, and, of course, a subscription if you like this content. We do release, or at least if we're being consistent, which I virtually never am, but we're trying, Watchdogs Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as well as Unapologetics in the light form Saturday, and in the full podcast form on Sunday. That's another podcast I do on apologetics rather than on the news. And we even do some open rooms and debates and stuff of that nature. We'll have future shows at some point as well. So if you guys would like to get notified of that content, please do subscribe, ring that bell so that you actually get notified of the content. And of course, questions, comments, criticism, concerns in the comments section below. I'll have links to all the articles we read here in the description. There will also be links to my different social media and other streaming platforms. So I am now on a couple other streaming platforms, though I haven't actually posted any content yet, specifically Rumble and Library. You'll have links in the description to those particular streaming sites, but also you'll have links to my BitChute, GodTube, Instagram, Parler, Gab, Minds, Twitter, Facebook, right? All the different social medias, Reddit. We like to, make sure we're throwing out a broad tent so we can get the word out to a lot of people, right? Recommend you, of course, sharing and following and all that different stuff. And if you would like to support us financially, you can do so by going to our Patreon. There will be a link to that in the description as well. But you can find me on any of these websites, Patreon, any of the social media, any of the video sharing websites, with the handle The Synagogue. I do have the handle on all of these different websites, The Synagogue. So, even if I have a different display name or something like that, you'll be able to find me there. And of course, any financial contribution would be greatly appreciated. Any likes are greatly appreciated. Any subscriptions would be greatly appreciated. And of course, your questions, comments, criticisms, like I already said below. We'll be back on Friday, my friends. I do have a question before I leave you. In the face of Armageddon, will you compromise?